Today is Tuesday, March 26th. Can everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. McLean, could you please take the roll?
Kempner.
Here.
Murad.
Present.
Patterson.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Shadle.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Trotto.
Here.
Kaplansky.
Here.
Commissioner Buckler informed me that she would be absent this evening.
Okay. Moving on then, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the agenda or have any changes?
In addition to the agenda under communications, we did receive 3 letters after packets were printed, copies of which are in front of you.
Okay. Any other comments, changes, or motion?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any other discussion on those? Mr. McLean?
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. Okay, moving on then. Besides the 3 items that Mr. McLean has mentioned for communication, are there any additional items that we need to be aware of? No?
None at this time.
Okay. Okay, the next item then would be the minutes from the 26th, February 26th. Any changes to those? Or motions? Does anyone want to make a motion for that if there's no changes?
Motion to approve.
Second. No second.
Anything else on the minutes? No? Mr. McLean?
Murad.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Kempner.
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. Okay, next up is citizen comment. If there's any citizens that have comments for items not on the agenda, we'll ask you to come forward at this time. There's a sign-in sheet provided next to Mr. McLean, so please sign in. As a reminder, we will not engage you in discussion. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and address and keep comments to 4 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to comment on an item not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close citizen comment and move on to our first agenda item. Mr. McLean or Mr. Baumgarten, who is going to begin the introduction of that?
I will defer discussions on the capital improvements plan to City Manager Baumgarten.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you recall from years past, the City Manager and the Finance Director traditionally comes before this body in April to present the Planning Commission, or to present the capital improvements plan to the Planning Commission. There's been talk each of the years that I've been here about perhaps coming to the Planning Commission a little bit early, giving more of an opportunity for the Commission to review the document and the plan as it comes together. When it comes back in April, it really is the last opportunity for the Commission to sort of see it, review it, and so it's sort of an implied approval process. So we want to try to come before you a little bit earlier and talk about how this plan is coming together. And I do want to preface sort of where we're at in the budgeting process at this point. We are, the point that we're at in the budgeting process and our internally is that myself and the Finance Department during this week and a little bit into next week goes through, we meet department by department to review the requests from that department. And so that does include actually the capital improvement request as well. So this document is subject to change slightly. You'll note on the version that sits in front of you, it is a draft copy. And I will note as I go through the various departments whether or not we have met with this department or whether or not we have a meeting pending this week. Also, you'll notice that, well, in our schedule, So we'll finish up with all of these department meetings. I will continue to review this with finance staff. We'll start to get a clearer understanding of where our revenues sit and how we forecast those for the upcoming years. And then there's a good chance that myself and finance director go through in consultation with the department directors, and we start to perhaps whittle this down. Or the dream scenarios, of course, we say, hey, what else would you like to maybe consider doing, or can we escalate this a little bit and maybe do this in a further forward year? So, so saying that we are a lot sooner than many of you are accustomed to seeing us now. So, again, I will just note where a lot of these things are definitely a draft. We haven't had the opportunity to review these with the department directors just yet, but absolutely wanted to honor the request of the Planning Commission to try to get before this body sooner than the April meeting so that you guys have the opportunity to ask questions. These are questions that I can then carry into my meetings with my department directors, and it's early enough now that we can have perhaps a conversation that starts here and continues between myself, the finance director, and the department itself. So very long preface to sort of why this is a little bit different than what the commission's used to from years previous. At your place setting was a hard copy. I apologize for not being able to get that to you in advance, but you'll see it's a 5-page document that goes through all of the requests that we have received from our various department directors. The first 2 pages, unsurprisingly, are all recreation. Our recreation department, not only does it operate out of the community center, but it also operates many, many parks all across our fair community here. And so you see not only are those itemized specifically, but you'll see where some of those actually lead back to, well, we can discuss this as we go through. So again, my standard preface by department is going to be when our next meeting is. In this case, recreation, we're going to be meeting tomorrow morning. So I have not actually gone through this with the department director yet, but want to take the opportunity. She has submitted these items and want to take this opportunity to go through it with the commission. Keep in mind that much of the information here and much of the capital plan as it applies to the recreation department grows out of the recreation 5-year plan. And that was a document that we adopted a few years ago and really sets the stage in 5-year increments on how we plan to improve the parks and in one case expand our parkland offerings as well. So I would like to jump in first and go line by line with this. We should be out of here by about 11:30, so shouldn't be an issue at all. Starting first with Merchants Park, which is 1/2 of the largest park space that we have if you combine Merchants and Oxford's Park, which we are intending to do as we know, of course, this year. Since the last time I stood before this body, we've been approved for a grant, which we're very excited about. I was noting today to some of the commissioners that we began the initial steps of sort of looking at phasing for that project, looking at with the grant award that we received, some of the design elements that we're really excited about. So Merchant and the next park, Oxford, there are looking to be combined in the next couple of years. So you'll see there's upgrades listed here to the lighting poles. Yes, the light poles. There are 2 baseball fields or softball fields on Merchant Park, and so those poles need to be updated. The poles themselves, that is. So the actual physical pole as well as the lights themselves, both are subject to upgrades this year, or the 1920 budget, which will start as of July 1. We have netting. We're budgeted for netting this year as well, or next year as well. This year we're actually looking at netting to establish sort of a hard perimeter on the outfield, because it gets a little bit confusing for those that aren't playing baseball but don't want to cross over into the outfield per se accidentally and interfere with the baseball game. And so we have netting going in, and then poles for that netting coming in the next year as well. Upgrades to the benches, drinking fountains, and netting's called out separately there. And then also, as we talked about, some fencing as well. That's the upgrades to Merchants. Oxford, you'll see some more of the elements that we've been talking about paying with through the grant project, and you'll see those funds are indicated there in the wide column. So under the state funding, you'll see walking trails, restroom facilities are 2 of our biggest things that we're very excited about. Moving down a little bit, you'll see there's new playground equipment. picnic tables and umbrellas, the much anticipated splash pad coming in the budget for the 1920 budget year, and then also all the engineering that is going to go into making sure that this all comes together well. That's probably our most exciting one, I'll be honest with you up front. Any questions on those items?
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the amount that's listed, is this the match that we're required to present, or is that the total cost?
This is total cost, and so you'll see where it's tied out separately there with what we believe is going to be covered by the state grant, but in total, we've got about $360,000 worth of upgrades planned for there, with about $180,000 coming from state matching grants.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to Angel Park, you'll see not in the next budget year, but in subsequent budget years, we have planned upgrades to the basketball courts, as well as refurbish the tennis courts, and then the ball field surface material needs to be upgraded as well, or replaced on a periodic basis as well. At the tot lot, we have new playground equipment at $60,000 in the 21-22 budget year, and then some drainage upgrades, landscaping, and an ADA path. Lazenby, we've got upgrades to the landscaping, to drainage in the 1920 budget year. Also in 21-22, we have upgrades to light poles, lights, netting, and netting. And so you'll see how those totals come together. Moving on to Oxford Towers Park. Tennis court repairs, park reconfiguration. For those that aren't familiar with that park, it has kind of an odd layout. The Friends of Parks and Recreation did a really good job last year of making some upgrades to there, allowing us to put in some tables, make it a much more friendly space. So we were happy about that, but we've also have an eye towards the future and doing some more exciting things with that park as well. Again, per our 5-year master plan, or Parks and Recreation master plan. JC, currently our largest one. If you separate merchants from Oxford, you've got upgrades in it looks like its big year is going to be the 2021 fiscal year. Remodeling for accessibility, new play structure, upgrades to landscaping, installation of an ADA path, pavilion repair and restoration, installation of bathrooms at that park, and then we listed out the engineering for that as well. And then we've got a couple of play structure instruments as well slated for this year. But what we have there is starting to age a little bit. We've had a couple of things break, and so it'd be nice to have a couple of near-term upgrades to that park as well. Community park, adjacent to the community center. Again, you'll see a theme here: upgrades to drainage, landscaping, and ADA paths. One of the bigger ticket items there is we have several baseball fields along in the community park, and so we have upgrade to lighting poles there. It's going to be a rather large ticket item for us.
That's the right number for lighting on those 3 fields?
I'm going to actually make a note about that, because in some of the previous ones, it's been one less 0.
Yeah,
And
I would think so.
Yeah, so we'll confirm that with them. But we do have a lot of poles across all 3 community fields. But I sort of was jotting a note to ask that same question there. And then upgrades to lights themselves. And then you'll see again, poles for netting itself, upgrades to the sprinkler repair system, and then our tennis courts that are not technically in community park, but are closer there to Catalpa, also need to be resurfaced as well. The community center itself is included in this document. Not a lot of items there. We do have repairs and for the fencing around the facility. Pattongill Park, ball field resurfacing material. And then what I referenced earlier, there's been talk for a couple of years, and it was indicated in the 5-year plan, the installation of a linear park between Coolidge and Webster. I know Commissioner Richardson, we talked about this a little bit last year as well.
Right.
It is nice to see this sort of slowly inching its way towards the current fiscal year, but certainly you see people using the pathways there. We've got some planned water main work on one side. Thankfully, it's not open trench. We'll be able to do the install through boring. But with the new development going in at 13 and Woodward, we can do as much as we can to try to connect downtown Berkeley to that space. I know it's been planned well before that was even in the discussions, but it's making more and more sense as time goes on.
Appreciate those comments.
I have a question, back
Yes,
to
ma'am.
the community center stuff.
Sure.
The ice arena is supposed to come down this summer, as I understand.
Yeah, so like I
Are
say,
you doing anything with the ground there? Like,
well, right now we're talking about sort of flat grassing it and making it more like open parkland, so we can just kind of have simple enjoyment on there. No installations of any structures or anything like that at this point.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
quick question. A lot of these parks you have drainage. What's that entail?
A lot of times it's buried drainage, like we did with Oxford Park, so we actually put storm drains and structures in that drained out the surface areas and,
Okay.
and tied into the city's sewer system. Okay, beginning on page 3, you have the library. We were able to meet with Library Director Matt Church on Monday to go over some of these items, so this should reflect, this reflects that meeting. Moving through here, we are approaching the period of time where, again, we need to resurface and reseal coat the parking lots. We also have repainting in the exterior coming up, as well as repainting of the interior. We're actually talking about maybe making that a singular project, getting one individual in there. Actually, apologize, I didn't follow my line across. Missed the HVAC upgrades as well. So we have our HVAC system was last upgraded in 1998. We've actually, thankfully, had the HVAC system sort of in the next budget year for the last 2 budget years. The contractor that we have has done a great job of maintaining the machinery on hand, but keeping in mind that it is 1998 machinery, we're going to reach an end to that eventually. 21 years is a pretty good run. So we've been able to move this out in previous years, but that is likely going to come due in the near term. So moving on to, and you'll see actually, I wanted to make a note on the repainting of the exterior and the interior. You'll see that actually shows up twice on there. This is one of the reasons why we forecast these things out so far. So we do a 6 to 7 year plan, so nothing can sneak up on us. Repolstering lounge chairs, recarpeting, renovating and expanding storage room. That was something we actually think we did in years past. And then redoing the entrance as well. And so the library was our most recently renovated building that we have. So it's actually, of all of our buildings, is in clearly the best shape for those that have been in through it. So a lot of these aren't high dollar items outside the HVA system, but we're in a nice spot where we just, by continuing to do this maintenance and keeping on top of things, it keeps them from coming into a poor condition. Speaking of poor conditions, the municipal building. We have this meeting scheduled for Wednesday, so as you'll note, we have not had the opportunity to go over this with the finance department just yet, but we do have a meeting pending on the topic. We have talked for a while about reconfiguring the interior of City Hall to help with our internal workflow, and as well as create some more spaces that we think will be useful to the public. And so you see there's dollar amounts in there between the 1920 budget as well as the 2021 budget. And then the audio and visual sound equipment for the council chambers. It's coming to the end of its useful life. Some of the camera systems we have in here, the camera system we have in here has been slowly upgraded throughout, so we hope to come in far less than the $50,000 indicated there. But in order to be conservative in our budgeting, we'd like to kind of make sure we have a number that we know we're not going to exceed when we go through this process here.
Mr.
Moving on.
Baumgarten?
Sir.
Just for clarification, you have a wayfinding line item under municipal building, which the amount is blank, and indicating it comes from the DDA.
And then further on, there's a wayfinding line item under DDA with a couple of amounts. Can you just explain
Sure.
what that is?
This is something I anticipate a number going into that item. What we've been talking about for a couple of years, at least the last two, is redoing the city's wayfinding signage. A lot of the wayfinding signage you find around town has either rusted or faded to the point where it's not useful. Some of them still indicate, the district court here. Some of it still indicates the Berkley Ice Arena. And so updating that, new signage for the city's parks and things like that will be the opportunity for the city to do. And it's going to be done in conjunction with wayfinding signage in the internal business district. Big topic conversation at the DDA board's last meeting as well. And so there'll be in-district signage and then in the city proper signage for that. But that is anticipated to be sort of done as a joint project between the city and the DDA. So I do anticipate a number going into there.
Oh, okay.
We've got a phased plan that we've looked at that we're trying to put some dollar amounts behind now. And we just haven't been able to fill in that slot yet.
And the number, would that be for items outside of the DDA boundaries? Or would it be, is this a joint project which is going to fund from both sources for the entire city?
We're going to look at them as two separate projects just to keep the TIF monies used in the most proper way possible.
Okay.
And so they will be sort of segmented. When we come back to you, I'm going to drop the DDA tax increment capture fund portion off of there.
Okay.
That'll be wholly found within the DDA's capital improvements plan.
Yeah.
And the city's, we anticipate this to be a general fund funded project.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Matt,
Sir?
where is there a line item or a budget or a number anywhere for taking down the ice arena?
It's not-
It's going to cost money.
Yes, it is going to cost money. And it was in the Recreation Director's proposed budget. Again, this being an evolving document over this process, when he comes back in April, you'll see that dollar amount.
Okay.
It won't necessarily be a capital improvement, but it is, there's a budget number that comes along with it.
Yeah, okay.
There is. Okay, moving to page 4. Public Works, a very active fund, as you can see. Public Works, by its nature, encompasses your major road fund, your local road fund, your water fund, your sewer fund, as well as the Public Works General Fund. So you'll see a lot of different purchases made from various sources that we have within our purview. We anticipate having a joint resurfacing program with Road Commission. That's going to be a project that's going to stem from, or going to move from 12 Mile, or along 12 Mile from Greenfield to Coolidge. We actually met with RCOC today to start the pre-con on this project. It's going to be, right now they're working on the scope. It's going to be what they call a 3R. It's not reading, writing, and arithmetic, nor did they think that joke was very funny. But it's a resurfacing, restoration, and repair. I believe there's a 3 Rs there, but it's not a full reconstruction, which is they call it 3R and 4R projects. We anticipate that to be some point during summer of next year. Again, it's mostly a federal fund. It's a 80-10-10 split. 80% of the funds that go towards this project are going to come from a federal grant, 10% coming from Road Commission of Oakland County, 10% coming from City of Berkeley. So we anticipate that, again, very early, still talking about scope. They sort of referred to it as mostly an ADA project with some road surfacing. So it's going to be, one of the things that we know is going to be included in this is redoing all the ramps to make sure that they are consistent with the current ADA standards as well. And so, again, a lot more to come on that project, but that is the very first line item, and you'll see our portion of that is just 10% of the total cost that they anticipate incurring over the course of that project. We've got a CDBG ramp program coming this year. As you know, every couple of years we've been doing replacing our regular ramps at intersections on the pedestrian pathways with the tactile pavers. For the visually impaired, they understand that when they feel those bumps, that they've approached an intersection and need to be extra aware of their surroundings. So that's, again, we've been on about a 3-year cycle with those projects, and we accumulate funds through our community development block grant program. and then do a singular project with them. Potential road main, water main work, we're going to be sort of in the practice of having an annual water main replacement program that comes from, as you remember, we redid top to bottom our water rates a couple years ago. That's what this was going into. It was going into a fund that would help us replace our water main. As you see, we anticipate there to be about $1 million project every year. That's also going to be aided by the voter-approved infrastructure millage as well. So that's, again, helps these projects go that much farther, helps us do that much more work. You'll see the combination of the top two items there, potential water main project as well as the road millage project. And so between the two of those, we're excited to be averaging about $2 million of infrastructure work annually, which is going to help us go a long way. You know, it's not a silver bullet, but it definitely helps us hit our most needed areas.
Question, is that going to improve the flooding problem we're having in the basements?
Yes, it will have a hand in that. So these, again, not talking silver bullets, a large storm is still going to be problematic for us, as we found out through our capacity study, that if we have another 2014 where it's a massive deluge of rain, then we're likely still going to have issues. But between the work that we're doing internally and then also a lot of the work that the George W. Kuhn Sewer District is doing as well, we actually think we're going to be able to make some pretty good inroads into improving the functionality of both our systems, which again should cut down on the basement flooding that we see. Also, the DPW has been working on implementing a restricted cover program, which I know you end up seeing more surface flooding because of that, but the benefit it has to all of our basements is that it slows down the pace at which the water is entering our system, keeps them from being overwhelmed, and then keeps it, in large part, from being able to back up into the basements there. So it's sort of an all hands on deck. We're hyper local, citywide, and then a regional effort to try to stem those problems.
Okay. Mr. Baumgarten?
Sure.
So this line item where it says water main, do you mean water and sewer?
Mm-hmm. No, we're still, you'll see the sewer portions are indicated, I believe, later in here as we do a lot of our, we'll come to it, we do our lining program. Our lining program is what's helping us improve the overall functionality of that system.
So I'm trying to clarify the assistance you're talking about to the basement flooding problem. It's not going to come from water main repair.
From sewer?
No, I'm sorry,
Sewer.
but some of our infrastructure dollars are going to go towards sewer improvements.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Stemming from that millage. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you're right, you're correct to say it's a separate line item indicated later.
Can you give us an idea what type of improvements? Are you going to expand the capacity of the sewers, or are you going to, is it just a question of making them a little more engineeringly efficient?
Right now, we haven't gotten into some of the later, larger projects, but we're working on putting the capacity analysis that we had done now about a year and a half ago into practice.
Okay.
And so I don't have an immediate answer now on what form those projects are going to take from year to year, but one of the biggest benefits that we're finding is the ability to make our system more efficient, period.
All right.
And so, and the lining helps us do that. Let's see, sidewalk ramp work.
That's ramp, right?
Ramp, right. Right, Los Angeles is on their own, I'm not helping them. Let's see, we're working on a water main asset management plan that's now become a requirement from MDEQ or Deagle or whatever it ends up being. Concrete repairs throughout the community. Citywide concrete patches also are indicated in here. Continuing our spray patch program, crack sealing, overbanding, whatever we can do to help get extra life out of the roads that we are not able to whole scale, give a triple R to. You'll see seal coating, stamped concrete sidewalks, again, trying to extend the useful life. More sidewalk ramp work. The reason these are called out separately is mostly because of the funding sources are a little bit different for each of them. And so that helps us from a budgeting standpoint keep those projects isolated. Water main cross connection controls, Again, this is specific to what we were discussing, the mainline relining in our water and our sewer lines. That's a big efficiency project. And we have, I think we actually crossed the 30% threshold as we finish up the linings just last week. So we do have a significant portion of the city system now lined. And one of the benefits of that is not only is it more efficient, but it makes it more resilient from collapsing and from aging pipes around it. You're literally putting a brand new pipe inside the existing pipe. And so you don't have to worry about it being crushed or damaged or infiltration or anything like that. So there's a lot of benefits to relining.
How much longer do we, if we're 30%, it's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah, we're about 2 decades in, and we've gotten about 30% out of it. So we do
So
anticipate.
it's a forever project,
Well,
pretty much.
probably. We'll have, at our current pace, we'll likely have, when we finally finish 100%, the resin pipe, interior pipe lasts a lot longer than the most materials, the various materials we have now. And so hopefully there'll be a couple of years where perhaps we don't have to do a project like this, but yes, best practice would be to get right back on those to make sure that they never end up fully collapsing and causing any issues from lack of neglect or whatever could come from it. So, but yes, that's the key to infrastructure is you're truly never done. As soon as you take your foot off the gas, you end up with all the issues that we talk about day in and day out across the state and the United States.
I have a question, though.
Sure.
We keep going back to the sewer line thing. We seem to be putting an awful lot of money into the sewer main project. I mean, it's not the water main project, but there's only like 1/4 of it that goes to the sewers. We don't seem to have as many problems with our water mains necessarily, but it seems like we have more problems with our sewers. Why is there more money going to the water mains than the sewers? We have a massive problem with sewers. I don't have a problem getting water to my house.
It's a matter of perspective. We do, I would say actually we have more of an issue with our water mains. I know that when our sewer mains, when we have a storm that overwhelms our system, it certainly is, it's bad. It happens to our personal effects. But whereas that could happen once every 3 to 5 years, we also have 20 to 30 water main breaks every year. And so, and that, again, if you can't supply water to your citizenry, you're not doing a very good job at just baseline civilization kind of stuff. So that's why we invest so much more in the water main, is because it plays a crucial need, and it's just part of those baseline service delivery kind of things.
Okay.
And in a water main, if it's, or a sewer, if it's collapsed, it's not going to work at all.
Right. Right.
And then what you're doing with the relining is going to prevent collapsing, and if you do find collapsing, then you repair it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like one of the keys for us in our approach is finding these things before they collapse. That's why about every 3-year cycle, we're through the entirety of our system and rating it to make sure that there's no areas that are troubling to us. In fact, if you recall, last year on Catalpa, we had to go through and do a project where we actually had to replace a section of sewer. We found it in the course of our normal maintenance, found that it wasn't a good candidate for relining. Relining wasn't going to help in this situation. Actually had to physically cut it into the ground, remove it, and put new piping in. So ideally, we're finding these things well before they collapse, which is why you don't hear a lot of that from out of city Berkeley.
Matt?
Sir.
The item right in the center of this citywide road, and I don't know what WM means. Water main.
Yes, sir.
$5,000 this year and next from the major street fund. Is that do I take it that that's the initiation of the planning to use the bond monies that were approved?
At that amount, yes, sir.
That's getting that off the ground, okay. That's what I thought, but thanks, I just wanted to make sure.
Let's see. I want to call your attention to another thing in the middle. We've been in the process right now of planning out a sidewalk replacement program. It's been about 15 years since our last one, and that has generally been the cycle that we've been on for at least for the last 3 iterations of it. It's about every 15 years we go through, and we do through special assessment district, replace sidewalks to prevent trip hazards and things like that. And so we are ramping up for, I shouldn't say ramp it up because that's a whole different process, but we are preparing for our 15-year cycle of going through and doing our sidewalk replacement program again.
I have a question. Are you doing that, like, are people in a quadrant allowed to get it in 1 year, or is it kind of like anybody who needs their sidewalk replaced?
That's part of what we're talking about doing is doing a phase plan. So the conversation so far has been, is doing an all at once 15-year cycle the best thing for us, or do we phase it out by a quadrant system or something like that, where we're sort of, again, getting into that never-ending infrastructure, but we're always doing a section so that, nobody has to wait either 15 years, or we can do this in much smaller sections and be a little bit more efficient in the process. But ideally, yes, we're talking about gathering these into projects that are close together. It's easier on the contractor, and it helps us get the most out of those funds.
Question on your sidewalk replacement. You guys are including $40,000 per year for the next 6 years?
That's the engineering portion of it,
That's
yes.
the engineering portion of it.
Mhm.
I mean, wouldn't they go through and do the whole city at once? Or, I mean, if it's every 15 years, why does it have to be $40,000 per year every year?
Because if we're, again, going back to that phase process now, because each winter with the freeze thaw, it changes kind of what we're looking at. So we didn't want to run in a situation where we did the whole city at once, and then by the time we work around to a quadrant, that study is 5 years old, and is not indicative of the true state. And so that reflects our potential approach of saying, okay, let's go section by section throughout the city. We'll do this. We'll do the studies. We'll go through. We actually have somebody literally walk each sidewalk, rate trip hazards, conditions, and potential for replacement.
I'm just looking at $40,000 just want to walk the sidewalk. Seems like a very large amount for an engineering fee.
Again, and that goes back to being conservative in our budgeting, and so we certainly hope to come in far less from that.
Okay.
But from where we're at right now, we think it's a safe number that we don't believe that we'll exceed.
Okay.
And we do have over 100 miles of sidewalks in Berkeley.
I understand that.
Let's see, ERU stormwater audit and study, not study. ERU is our equivalent rooftop units. That's for our commercial properties. That's one of the ways that we calculate the stormwater fees for our commercial properties. You take just what you would think equivalent to the rooftop of a residential home, and then you apply that formula to the amount of impervious space on the commercial property, and that's how we calculate the stormwater. We are one of just two communities right now that do that in Oakland County, and really I think across the Evergreen or the GWK sewer district. It has now been touted as a best practice, so we're proud to be a leader on that as well. But it's come time for us to recalculate that ERU, and that's one of the things that we're going to be working on with Oakland County, and then also some internal work that we need to do as well. So that's why you see that in there. Let's see, non-residential surcharge. So then we go again. That's the ERU and the non-residential surcharge study and audit tied together. You see road main, water main improvements, replacing outdated electrical and emergency lighting at DPW. So next couple of items are upgrades to the DPW yard itself. The HVAC is coming due, glass block window replacement, our salt dome needs to be replaced as well. Upgrades to the fuel management system. Since the last one we had, this isn't something that's going wrong. We're coming up to the cycle where it's time to upgrade our fuel management system, because if you recall, and the same thing goes for the salt, is we're not the only ones that gather fuel from there. Not only does it service Berkeley departments, but the school district as well as City of Huntington Woods also goes into there. So a way of better tracking and managing that fuel system across the various departments has been something that DPW has been looking at for a couple of years, and happy to see it on this fee schedule here, or the capital improvements plan. Let's see, underground fuel tank replacement. That will likely not be replaced underground. It would actually likely be an above ground unit when we go to make that change. Roof repairs improvements at DPW, perimeter wall upgrades. We do have a home that we own on Bacon between the commercial district and the DPW yard. That we sort of have house demolition, yard expansion. That's one of those things that years come and go, but that item always tends to stay in the 4 years out column. We've talked for a while about when the need arises for us to actually, when we've outgrown our space, when the need arises for us to demo that house, we'll be able to expand the yard that much further and utilize that space. But again, like I say, we have not gotten to that point yet, and so this, again, doesn't get any closer. And this capital improvements plan than it has in plans past. Egress doors, again, on an upgrade schedule there. Doors again, upgrading our two-way radio stations, upgrades to facade and gutters, and then lunchroom and locker room upgrades as well. What you don't see on here is, and it's reflected because it's reflected in our equipment replacement program, is things like trucks and dump trucks and beds and equipment and things like that. That is all replaced we track those anticipated items on what we call the CERP, the equipment replacement, capital equipment replacement schedule. So that's why you don't see them on this document. Final page, I promise, is page 5, starting with public safety. Our public safety meeting is this Friday. So again, these are not items that we've been able to go through with that department yet, but included in this list are the upgrades to the range. We have the fire hall expansion is going to come in under this budget year. We don't anticipate it spilling over into the next budget year, but if it does, then you'll see that the remainder of that money show up in the 1920 document, or the 1920 column on the when we come back to you in April. Again, HVAC system is reaching the end of its useful life and needs to be replaced. We're looking at basically remodeling top to bottom our dispatch area. For those that have had the chance to walk through there, it is incredibly inefficient. It's very old. It serves the purpose we have, but it's not the best use of the space that we have. So we actually have a lot of legacy machinery just sitting in that space, taking up room. And in some cases, you've got sort of the old system and the new system sort of sits right in front of it, and they work that way. So looking forward to some definite upgrades there. And let's see, dispatch, Plymouth event expansion. That is, I believe, is the air cleaner equipment for the fire hall garage. It takes the exhaust and stuff out of there for the fire trucks. And then repairs to the basement Sally Port drain. We've got an issue with water intrusion when it rains at the basement. And for those not familiar with the terminology, the Sally Port is the area where when transporting a criminal, we actually pull in, close the door, and so it's a contained area. We are through there getting some water into the basement, so we need to stop that, obviously. And so we have some monies budgeted for the upgrades to that as well. That's public safety. Again, things like trucks, cars, and stuff show up on the capital equipment replacement plan, not the CIP. Downtown Development Authority, again, we have a pending meeting with them. Because of the unique nature of the downtown development body, it has its own board of directors, and we'll actually be going back in front of them on April the 10th for that board to officially, formally adopt its budget, and then the city council then has oversight over that budget as well. So that's one of the few that need approval of the city council itself, or a separate board prior to the city council itself. And I do anticipate, but when this comes back to you in April, there to be more in this document. It's really has only gone out about 2 years, and the DDA board and the executive board within that, the board of directors, obviously need to flesh out a 6 to 7 year capital plan. But you see examples of some of the things on there: lighting, streetscaping, wayfinding, as discussed earlier, and then. I see streetscape marketing here. I might have made a note to find out what the terminology applies to. I don't see there's a dollar amount assigned to it, but again, these are the kind of things that we go through and discuss with department directors, in this case, the board's executive director, when we sit down with them.
Do you anticipate that some of these things are going to have besides the wayfinding, will have dollar amounts with them too?
Yes, ma'am. So we'll likely have a very similar conversation when this comes back to you in April. And hopefully this was useful, just because kind of the nature of the timing. We do a lot of work between now and next month, and then even more leading into the city council's work sessions on, when did you say Berkeley Days was?
May 17, 18, 19.
So like 13th, 14th is when we'll sit down with, it usually ends up being always the same week, so.
Right, yes.
So when we sit down with city council and go over a very similar process to this, where we go line item by line item, explain the thought process behind putting resources to whatever the topic of the day seems to be, so.
Oh, I have one last question. Consumers went through and tore up a lot of the sidewalks out here on Coolidge. Are they replacing those, or is that our responsibility?
No, they're slated to come back as soon as frost laws lift and come back and do a full restoration. Even the areas, I'm a little bit turned around here, even the areas up front at the intersection of 12 Mile, they'll be replacing the stamped concrete that they tied into. And not just like the small sections, but whole-scale replacement, so that you don't have some weird patchwork in there. But they are coming back to do full restorations of the walking surfaces and the concrete.
I was concerned if it was our responsibility or theirs.
No, thankfully not. It's theirs. It's their project. It absolutely falls to them to do.
I have a kind of a multi-part question, I'm sorry.
Fine.
These numbers, these preliminary numbers, they are in the main generated by the departments and submitted to you? Is that how it starts?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and are there criteria that the departments use to determine what the numbers are, or they just rely on general experience and maybe doing some comparison shopping on the internet, or how exactly do they arrive at these numbers?
It's a lot of all of the above. Some of the larger capital items, it's sort of formula driven. We consult with our engineers a lot for the public works budget. Some of them do rely on just experience to say, listen, we did this a couple years ago. It was this amount of $1,000. In some cases, like I'm thinking about the like the library's HVAC system. That $220,000 was a vendor-driven number that when they reached out to find out how much that would be, just kind of a ballpark, a safe budget number that actually came from a vendor themselves. So it's all the above, and it varies by department, and it certainly does vary by item too.
Okay, part two of my question is, other than the 5-year park master plan for the parks, do any of the planning documents, such as the master plan or other planning documents the city has generated, are they factored into the development of this capital improvement plan? Can you identify any other sources for these projects?
Sure.
Other than
Absolutely. A good example would be the DDA is in the process right now of doing its comprehensive downtown master plan, and that will have some actionable steps that can be taken within the district, and those that apply to the capital improvements would be indicated in this document. So that would be the driver for from the time that is developed and approved to whenever it reaches the end of its the action plan. That's the kind of document that would drive what those capital expenditures would look like for the development district. And to a certain extent, the same thing would be true for the the city's master plan as well, that this body is going to be working on pretty quick. But that's not likely to extend to like facility improvements as much. But I hope it ends up having at least a part of where we're going with things like community centers, things like city halls. The last master plan, if you recall, made some recommendations about perhaps moving the DPW yard to a different location, so that would be factored in as well.
And the third part of my question is, given that these numbers are initiated at the department level and they're maybe plugged into this CIP using some planning tools, resources that are out there, are there any is there any room for additional criteria for, for both the cost estimates and the projects? What I'm driving at here is, if we want it to become a greener community or a community with a smaller carbon footprint, I think that objective would guide some of this thinking in here. Do you see a way of incorporating that sort of criteria in the planning process?
It's a good question. I do feel like that vein runs through our entire conversations that we have with our directors. And so they're often the ones coming to us with ideas on how to incorporate these things.
Okay.
Certainly with a lot of the talk about HVAC replacements, any machinery replacements and things like that, conversation is always steers towards efficiencies and reducing the energy load that comes with these equipment.
Do you see any need to take a step back and look at the planning process to see where where more sustainability principles should be incorporated? Or from what you're saying, it's a process that kind of happens by itself as well. So I'm just wondering if there's a need to do anything more formally to recognize these kinds of factors.
Yes, there is, and that's why I'm excited about the energy audit that we're working through with EcoWorks now, and the work that putting on your other hat that you do with the Environmental Advisory Committee. I think that's going to yield a great amount of fruit, and it's going to help our directors key in on maybe some of the same projects, but a better view on what machinery ends up satisfying the goals of those projects. Okay. And so my simple answer is yes. There's a much longer one, but the simple one is definitely yes.
Thank you.
I don't see the schools listed anywhere in here. Is that not part of this document?
Yes, sir. Planned completely separately by the board and their administration.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, I have another one, but it's not.
Go ahead.
It's not that complicated. What form would you like our feedback to come in? Just more comments at the next meeting, or?
Feel free to say we don't have to wait a month. Feel free to reach out to me individually, and
Okay.
if there are questions that come up, like I say, I do know you received this document today at your place settings. You came in,
Yeah.
so I apologize that we weren't able to do it a little bit ahead of time. But hopefully this forms the basis for a good and robust conversation in April too. So.
Yeah, we're now a month ahead of time, so
Right.
you don't have to apologize.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks
We'll
so
look
much. I
forward to
appreciate the time.
April presentation.
Look forward to it as well. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next item then. Mr. McLean, do you want to give us a brief overview of what you've prepared for us?
Yes, brought back some changes to the proposed ordinance on exterior appliances. What I'm looking for this evening is kind of looking for some direction, from the Planning Commission. There seemed to be a consensus about generators. There seemed to be less of a consensus about the air conditioning units in side yards, so I was kind of hoping we'd be able to maybe do some type of discussion or straw poll to kind of see what direction we want to go with that. Additionally, there was a lot of feedback the last time we discussed this item, addressing items that could be rendered non-conforming through ordinance changes. So I've included some language that addresses allowing for maintenance and incidental repairs to exterior appliances that would be rendered non-conforming.
Okay. And we did have one communication related to this item from Joshua Hunter, so we'll include that in the record as well. Is there anyone who would like to start the discussion on this item?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Shado?
I'm just curious about the 50%. I don't remember speaking, having a discussion about any kind of percentage of deterioration or damage. I do remember having the discussion of what happens with the grandfathering, and to my recollection, it was that those that currently have those appliances in the side yard would be grandfathered in
Yes,
at that point. I believe that was the discussion.
yes, the percentages, I looked at, we've got a section on non-conforming buildings and non-conforming uses, and I applied similar language to maintenance and incidental repairs to like a non-conforming structure. So that's where that percentage came from.
I think it's a very tough one to.
I think, if I may, Matt.
Yes,
Chairman.
Mr. Smith.
I think our discussion was, if it's non-conforming now, and it needs replacement, because it will, they can still put it in that same place. So I don't know if the 50%, as in a garage or a structure, really applies here, because, you know, if it's there, it's there. And we're accepting that. We just don't want necessarily, well, as we discussed tonight, we may not want new equipment to be put in side yards.
Yes, because if say you've got a like a non-conforming exterior appliance, if it has to be replaced, technically you would be removing a legal nonconformity,
Right.
and then putting something new would be a brand-new nonconformity, which
Nonconformity.
changes the nature of that discussion.
Right.
But I think as far as an exterior appliance, I don't know, I think as we discussed, that would be acceptable as opposed to a building structure. That, you know, if it's existing, it burns up, it falls apart, it's falling apart, put a new one in, that's acceptable, even though it's still non-conforming, because it's probably going to be quieter, probably going to be more efficient than what's going now. So I think that's different than, a little bit different than a building structure. So, and I mean, he's seeing a lot of heads nodding, and I think that's the intent.
Well,
So,
being in the position that I have one, that if this passes as non-conforming, and the previous practice was, well, if you got a letter from your neighbor that approved, that didn't have a problem with it, well, that letter, you know, I mean, I've been in this house 25 years, so that letter had to have been done before I even moved into this house. So, and, you know, I would think that if they have to replace it, they should have to go through the same process that they got the approval before. This is before we change this. That they'd have to get a letter from me saying that it's okay to put it back there. Because it's, you're putting in a new appliance, even though it's replacing what's there.
is that correct, Mr. McLean, that if you were replacing a unit, that you would, again, the city, under their current policy, would request a new letter? Or has that not been the practice?
That's not been the practice. I know for new air conditioning units, it's still the city policy of getting, you know, the letter of approval from the neighbor, which is, it's not a very good way to do it because it's a policy and not an ordinance.
That's for a brand-new
Yes,
situation.
Install,
Yeah.
not
A
replacement.
new install, not a replacement.
correct.
So as it stands right now, you can replace it just by getting the proper permits, no other signatures or anything like that is needed.
Yes.
So if the commission were to go down the road of not allowing exterior appliances in the side yard air conditioning units, then perhaps it would make sense to include something, instead of referring to the 50%, something about residences with existing units in the side yard shall be considered permitted accessory structures, or I don't know what the terminology would be, but somehow note that an existing side yard unit would be considered permitted, and it would not therefore be non-conforming. You could not increase the size of that unit, but could continue to stay there in perpetuity and be replaced and maintained and all those things.
But I think it should still meet setback requirements.
So if someone's coming, I also have a non-conforming air conditioner, I guess, non-conforming in the side yard or under the policy. So if I'm replacing that unit, I'm assuming I could put it exactly where it is now, on that same pad, that same area.
Given that meets the manufacturer's criteria.
Yeah, yeah.
But it'd have to be the same footprint.
Right, which
Or
I assume
smaller.
it would be, or they're
Or
probably
smaller.
only getting smaller, right? So,
Yeah.
No, that's not necessarily true.
True.
I think with the new coolants, some of them actually get
yeah.
a little larger, but I could be wrong. I don't think like computers and things, they're necessarily getting smaller. They're getting more efficient, but
Maybe larger.
it's not significant. And I could be wrong on that. I just, I don't think that's necessarily a given, that it will be smaller.
So right now, under the policy, do we look at, I'm guessing we don't look at setbacks.
No.
Not for the air conditioning units, no.
That's what I thought, okay. So, it sounds like the commission's generally in agreement on the 50% doesn't necessarily fit
I don't know if
this.
that really applies here. If it's there, you have to replace it, a replacement, you get to put it back again.
So the question you really need us to answer is whether or not we're willing to permit exterior appliances in the side yard, which would be consistent with the current city policy.
Correct. And if the direction of the planning commission is to not permit air conditioning units in inside yards, the downside of that is you could be looking at a significant number of variance cases.
I would imagine so, yeah.
I would say far more than we've had with generators in the last few years.
Yeah,
It would be a pretty major reversal of policy.
yeah. Comments on that? If nobody wants to start, I can start, but.
So are we trying to create a ordinance for both, or can we separate them? Have one if it's a generator, or,
Well, this whole
Only carry
discussion
one
got
ordinance.
I
started.
remember, but I'm
yeah.
just, I feel like we want air conditioners in, or maybe allow air conditioners in the side yard, but not generators, but it seems like we're spinning our wheels to be all inclusive of both appliances.
I know I'm one of the people that has concerns about ACs in the side yard because my home does not have central air. And up until the last few years ago, I didn't even put window air conditioners in. So I would hear the whine of my neighbor's AC unit all summer long.
Unmaintained AC.
Unmaintained, yeah. Sometimes that fan was so bad shape, the bearings that, you know.
And my neighbors have it in their side yard, and I don't hear it. So, I mean, it's.
And some of the issue is when you have a 40-foot lot, the side yard that they're using is the 5-foot
Oh,
setback,
Yep.
You're outlining my house, but I would,
you know.
instead of having all of our residents to now have to put our air conditioners in our backyard and totally change the
But we're not
policy.
saying all, we're saying only if so.
Oh, the new
so like-
installs, but
like
or
if this
replacement,
passed,
though.
if this passed, I would not be, well, no, I would not be allowed to put it in my side yard now.
Correct, but nor could your neighbors.
Nor could, but
they
my
were
neighbors,
replacing it.
because they're grandfathered, they would
Oh, you're
be.
allowing
Yeah.
that, okay.
That's what we're talking about. So, but.
New
if-
installs would have to go
Or
in the
if we
backyard.
could say, you know, because we have the 15 feet between the two houses, but that's not where my driveway is. Okay, so we shared a large side yard because I live on a corner. So by setting setbacks, I could potentially put it in my side yard, rather than saying it's completely excluded, but to say, okay, we're talking about it here, that it had to be the setback, minimum of 5 feet from any property line, okay? So by doing that, and it has to be no more, greater than, I think I saw in here, 3 feet from the building. So by doing that, in a 5-foot setback, people couldn't put an air conditioning unit in there or a generator. So,
So this is,
but in my case, I have a 10-foot side yard.
So you
Actually, it's a
could
little
put it
more
there.
than that, it's 11. I could put it there based on this, and if we took the language out that side yards aren't allowed.
Right.
so
We
this,
could say then it's allowed, but you have to meet these
the
requirements.
setbacks, which I
The
think would
setbacks.
probably lead to the ZBA too, but.
Yes.
Right.
It
it
still
would-
leads to the same place.
So,
Okay.
this is a general planning commission discussion item, so I will collect some public comment, but this is gonna be back before us a couple more times, I would guess. So we will collect that. So go ahead.
Okay.
Wendy Zabramski, Berkeley. I guess, you know, I've heard a lot of discussion on this, and I think, Tim, I think you are the exception to the rule. I think almost everybody has air conditioning now.
Yeah, and they do. They do.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the houses are closed up because of that. So, you know, the rare that you're, you know, going to hear that, I mean, you know, these are, a lot of them 40-foot lots. You're going to have air conditioning. And yes, you know, I understand they have to be so far from the line and such, but, you know, to say, you know, they're all in the back, it's just not gonna work for most people. And as far as the generators, you know, if they're used only on an emergency basis, you know, everybody's gonna be having them on. You know, I just think you're spending an awful lot of time on something that's going to be even hard to control, to police, you know, in a day and age when our houses are closed up in the summer because it's too hot out.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Additional comments?
I go back to the statement of still, what he said about splitting them up into the generator and other extreme units. The generators have a completely different scenario compared to AC units. AC units don't require as much as what the generators do, in my opinion. Generators are much noisier than most air conditioners also. Maybe your neighbor's is different, but I will say that looking at all the specs on generators that I've seen from Kohler and Generac and stuff like that, majority of them are over the 60 dB limit that they have here, so that's the first thing that happens. And there's no way you're going to hit 60 dB at 5 to 7 feet. That's just not feasible, no matter what kind of generator you purchase. So you're basically taking generators completely out of it with that statement. But you also require a certain amount of clearance for those generators that's going to pretty much take them out of most sidewalls as it is. But as for the air conditioners, those don't require those kind of clearances. And in the sidewall on most houses, in a 40-foot lot, you have 5 foot between those houses and your lot line. There's no way you're going to get 3 foot between the house, your air conditioner, and then 5 foot to the other house. That means you're pretty much taking all the air conditioners out of the side yards.
Right. Not all.
Except for the larger lots.
Right, like my lot's a
larger lots.
54-foot lot, but because I live on a corner, I don't have a driveway between my house and my neighbor's house.
So your one house will be the exception to probably 99% of Berkeley.
To a good portion of it, maybe not 99%.
Good portion, not 99%.
Yeah.
And I can't put it in my other side yard because it's kind of considered a front yard because I'm on a corner.
Yeah.
So I only have one place to put it as my backyard.
So you have a case for the ZBA.
You would be, and I would believe with your neighbors being in that side yard, I know your situation.
Right.
I'm not on the ZBA, but I'm sure that would be something that would be granted.
Yeah.
But you still have to go through the process.
Right, you still have to go
Yours
through the
being an
process.
oddball situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And in regards to the generators, okay, if there's a power outage, there's going to be a lot of people that don't have generators or have a portable generator. And if
Which
it's
is
during
much
this,
louder, I think.
which is much louder, absolutely. And if it's a summer power outage, the people that don't have generators, they're going to have their doors and windows open. They're going to be hearing generators run, okay? But if it's wintertime, everybody's closed up. It's not going to be making a lot of noise. Those units are much larger, and they don't have to be close to the house. They could be located, if you have room in a backyard behind your garage, it could be located there. It could be located next to your garage. It doesn't have to be close to the house. The air conditioner, it has to be because of the cooling, the piping for the cooling. So yeah, it is different, but I think we can get it done with one ordinance. We don't need 2 ordinances. And, you know, if anything, maybe we change the setbacks for generators, require this setback. AC requires this, but I still feel that we can get it all done with one, so.
I agree with it on one ordinance. I just think we need something to differentiate between generators and AC units or other exterior
So back
appliances.
to generators. Matt, you were saying that you don't think that, based on the 5 foot and 3 foot, they could not fit? How much clearance do those need for the
Well, you require
manufacturers?
36 inches by NEC code to any live
Okay,
electrical parts of that unit. So you need at least 3 foot in front of it, and usually require clearances around them of at least 2 feet all the way around them or more. So if you have a 5 foot sidewall in your yard, you're not going to be able to make it fit there as it is.
right.
So it pretty much puts you in the backyard anyway. So that takes 99% of Berkeley out of that scenario.
For the generator.
But as for the noise for the generator, you're never going to be able to hit those
Yeah,
noise
I
levels
don't
they're
think we
hitting.
should have dB in the ordinance.
I think it's going to be impossible to really actually enforce.
Accurately measure.
Is it this? Is it the car that just drove by? Is it, you know?
I'm just looking at it, the 60 dB at 5 to 7 feet is not even feasibly possible. They don't make a generator that goes on a house that has that dB.
We do have our standard nuisance ordinance. I'm assuming that includes some standards for noise.
It does not specify a decibel level.
Okay. Okay.
It does
So-
prohibit whistling.
We will add that to the list of things we need to look at as part of the zoning ordinance update. But I don't want to set ourselves up to not allow any generator, basically, because of a decibel level that
Right.
personally I don't feel comfortable setting, because I'm not familiar
Well,
with.
the other thing that's also going to set it off is the fact you can't be within 6 feet of a window based on the ordinance we're rating up, which
Which is the manufacturer's,
recommendations.
yeah.
And that's going to pretty much lock out most.
But if someone
Sidewalls.
had a very large lot or a double lot or something, then they could accommodate all of those requirements and
Yeah.
still have it there.
Yeah, there are areas of the city that
Yeah.
they can meet that requirement.
So,
But
But-
it goes back to falling into the AC unit has this clearances, and then a generator would need separate clearances. It doesn't need two different ordinances, it just needs to have two different clearance requirements.
couldn't we just have the manufacturer's specifications as the clearance requirements?
Yes, good. But the question comes up,
But
is
we
where
still-
does that clearance go
Right.
into it? Does it go into your neighbor's yard,
Right.
or does it go to your lot line?
Yeah,
Well, you
'cause-
could still
'cause-
have a setback from the lot line.
To put the setback from the lot line, yeah, I agree with that, but you can't get away with the clearance, because you got a 5 foot sidewalk, you could put it 2 feet off and literally have it a foot off your lot line,
Well, not if we had a setback, but.
if we had a setback,
Yeah.
correct.
Right. And when-
Marty, did you
yeah.
want to say
I
something?
heard a comment about larger lots. You know, having a larger lot gives you more opportunity to put these things behind your house.
Yep,
So the whole point is, why does the neighbor have to listen to your noise because you don't want it in your backyard and you don't want to listen to it? I think this is really to protect your neighbors.
Right.
So, you know, large lots, you can probably accommodate the setbacks. But still, it's in your side yard, bouncing off your brick or your siding into your neighbor's house. So I don't think that's a good argument.
Right, I agree.
So I'm trying to get a handle on just how much of a burden we're talking about imposing on people. I don't know the numbers, but I would suspect that the majority of people already have central air. And if their units are in their side yards, they're going to be grandfathered in, so no problem with that. It's only the person who, not only, but it's maybe predominantly people that want to replace or upgrade their HVAC that want to shift it from the backyard to the side yard.
Or knock down a house and build a bigger house.
Well,
Yep,
that's,
going on
Wanna
a
put in a
lot.
side yard.
or
but
one, or
that's,
put in an AC that doesn't already have one.
that's not an imposition on the homeowner who's been here. That's something you plan for when you're building your bigger house. So I don't regard that as a big burden. So, I mean, how many people are we talking about that are going to be so in need of changing what they've already had for years that they're going to go to the ZBA to get a variance?
So,
Because to get a variance, you have to say that I have no choice. I really have to put it where, on the side, and yet I've not had it on the side for the last 15 or 20 years. That doesn't seem like a winning argument to
well,
me.
so what's to prevent somebody that currently has it in their rear yard, okay? But they want to re-landscape their house and maybe put a nice patio and not have their air conditioner sitting next to their patio and decide to just, we're gonna move it. We're gonna get our neighbors to say, oh, it's okay to move it to the side yard, which is what's been happening.
Well, I don't really, I'm not comfortable with that scenario.
But I know there's people that don't want it in their backyard for that reason.
I would think that
Right,
that
just your
kind
landscaping.
of, that kind of consideration does not outweigh the community, protecting the community from excessive
Right.
noise.
Right.
Right.
And even if I had a central air conditioning system, which I don't, I wouldn't be using it every day of the summer. The only time I could see using it every day of the summer is if I had a health issue that required me to use it. And I don't.
So, I mean, is this a big problem, is really what I'm asking? Or is it just a matter of inconveniencing a few people that their personal preferences might get, not get met?
I
I
think-
don't know.
I think if you said there was 4 cases for the generator, 4 or 5, something like
Yeah,
that.
we
to the
had
ZBA.
we have 4 over, I think, the last 3 or 4 years.
I think
one a
this
year.
is going to be a bigger problem than you would anticipate, because we all have small backyards, and that's the only place, right, that we have to have the patio and to have a space for the kids to play, and an air conditioning unit really takes up a lot of that space. I'm a side yard air conditioning unit person, and it's because my backyard is so little, it would have taken up a third of our patio to have the air conditioning unit. And I know you don't think that's a big imposition, but moving that unit over 2 feet from where it is in the side yard so that it could be in the rear yard, how much of a difference does that make
But
to
you're-
my neighbor?
But yours is already in the side yard, so it's,
Right, I
Okay.
understand I'm grandfathered in, but I guess I'm talking about people in the future who are looking to utilize their backyard space.
New construction.
new
New
construction.
Yeah, new
construction?
construction, and that's a lot of that is
You know,
going on in the community
People are
today.
maxing out their sites,
Mm-hmm.
so they already don't have a big backyard, that house that
Right.
went next to you.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, that was your choice.
Yeah,
Just because you want a little bigger patio, that you think your neighbors should be exposed to your air conditioner, no.
But does moving the air conditioner over 2 feet so that it's now in my rear yard really make that much of a difference?
A little bit, because the sound isn't bouncing off your wall into your neighbor's wall.
Maybe a little bit, but
Well,
I
no,
mean,
that's a significant amount,
and
especially if you have a
a
brick
lot of
wall.
us have privacy fences.
No, I know.
I
know.
don't think it makes
I
a
don't think it's a-
huge difference.
Well, I do. I don't think that it's not a hardship on your point.
Oh,
If
I
you want all
agree.
that
It's not a
stuff,
hardship.
more power to you, but don't impose it on your neighbors.
So we just put a generator in, which is much bigger than an air conditioning unit.
Sure.
Put it in the back, put some brick pavers down. It's now a patio, and that generator's gonna be a nice little ledge for the barbecuing
That's-
utensils.
That's a good use of the
Not
appliance.
in the way, it's gonna help.
It'll fire up
I
your
mean, I do
barbecue.
suspect that there's probably some very creative ways that a builder can
Screening,
work
sure,
around
sure.
having to have it in the backyard. If-
And I think in the new constructions, I don't know if I've seen any, but I don't go around looking at them, but the one that was built next to me, it's in the rear yard, the AC unit.
And it can be. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in a new construction, and there's a new construction next to me, and they have their unit in the rear yard.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not doable. My concern is that we've had this policy, it hasn't been a problem. I feel like we're making a mountain out of a molehill, and I hate to reverse the city policy on something that's worked. It's my understanding it's worked. It's not formal, it's not a great way to do it because of that, but we haven't had any complaints or issues with it. Is that correct?
I've not heard any complaints.
And if the commission, doesn't agree with me, then that's fine.
Everybody's got to vote.
Yep, but I do think we have to send a clear direction to Tim about where everyone falls on this so that we can move forward.
I guess the thing that makes me uncomfortable about the current policy is you can get a letter from your neighbor, and that neighbor moves in a year.
Right, that's
Yeah.
my situation.
You know?
Yes, I agree, that's
What good is
not
the
a good
letter then?
policy.
No.
But then the new owner of the home,
Buys it as is.
Right.
you can look at your neighbor's yard and see their air
Yeah.
conditioner. If that's gonna keep
Yeah,
you up at
but-
night, then don't buy that house.
You don't know if it's going to keep you up. When it's not maintained
Well,
properly,
sure, but
then it does.
if
Then
you
it
think
would, yeah.
from your history of
Yeah.
knowing that a loud air conditioner in the neighbor's yard
Right.
bothers you, mine, it doesn't bother me, I wouldn't have a problem buying the house. But you still
And-
know after you sign the letter.
And we need to send a message to the builders too, as to where that AC unit has to go,
Right.
because, You know, in some cases, they might be building 2 lots, so who's the neighbor they're asking for permission? Themselves?
Right.
You know, and maybe they're not even asking, they just see the house they just tore down, the pad was in the side yard, oh, we're gonna put it in the side yard again. I don't know how that's working.
Right, well, that's up
So
to
we need
enforcement,
we
though,
need
not
also,
us as a board.
no, we need to send the building department also, to let them know where these things should be located for new construction, not just for people retrofitting into their existing homes. So,
I think we all agree that it needs to be different than the
yes,
ad hoc policy that we have now. It should be more formal.
yes.
Okay. Is there any other discussion, or should we maybe do a straw poll or something so we can give some clear direction? I don't know that anyone's changing their mind either way. So.
It's probably 5 to 4.
Yeah, I think so.
Or 4 to 4
We
tonight.
don't have Michelle, so.
That's good.
So
So
I'll,
any
I'll
other
say
comments?
this, I'll say this.
Discussion going with a time on.
In a property that has a larger side yard, I don't see it as being an issue, because I can think of areas in the city where they've got a lot of space between their
Sure.
houses. But when you're 40 foot, I have a problem with it.
So maybe,
That's why I'm
Okay,
saying
with the
use setbacks
yeah.
to police it.
So what we have in there now is the 5 foot and the 3 feet, and then obviously whatever the width of the unit is.
Right, and putting in the manufacturer's recommendations too.
Okay.
So you're gonna separate out air conditioners from generators?
Sure.
I think you could still have it as exterior appliances, but the manufacturer's recommendations would be what separates it out.
Right. Because I know my brother, he lives in a big house, lots of land. And the best place that he could get to put it, it was in his front yard, and had to go get a variance. And it's all screened and everything. You can't even tell it's there.
Yeah.
But he's 50, 75 feet off the road too.
Yeah.
You know, but that's where they put it. Because that's, you know, the rear yard is completely landscaped and patios, and one side yard is garage, and the other side yard was close to the neighbors, and he didn't want to put it there. So his only choice was his front yard.
Are we gonna use the same setback for both AC units and generators? Or are we gonna have a larger setback for generators?
I think generators, maybe it should be. In the areas where they have the space,
It's got to be somewhat different because you have to take the windows into consideration.
yeah.
Right. But I don't know that we need to, if those items are already contained in building and electrical codes, we don't need to put them also in the
Right.
zoning ordinance.
My concern is that with that, the setbacks that you guys have described here, you're basically taking every 40 and 50-foot lot and telling them you're not putting it in a side yard.
Right.
Yes, that's exactly what you're doing.
For new installs?
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
for new installs.
Guess I'm lucky I did it
I'm
before.
fine with grandfathering it in.
Yeah, we're not gonna have people move it.
Right.
No,
Unit
no.
Fries, we had a tree come down and fried our unit. Well,
Yeah.
or ours in the back anyway, but if it were the situation where it's in the
Right.
side, we're not gonna say, nope, can't put it there.
Right, whatever it is, it is.
So,
yeah.
I don't.
You know, and I'm pushing for this, and I'm starting to consider at some point that I'm gonna have to put a central air conditioning system into my house. It's gonna be really expensive, because I have baseboard heat. That means all ductwork, everything, so. Yeah, so,
You're not air conditioned?
you know, so, yeah, I'm gonna have to find a spot in my rear yard, and put it there, and I'm fine with that.
Okay, we know where Tim lies.
So you know how I'm.
Thank you for the disclosures.
Okay, so do you want us to take a straw poll? I want to make sure we provide something very clear to you, because we've discussed this a couple times, and I think everyone's kind of
I think it would be
following what
beneficial.
we've following. Okay.
So
All right.
what do we,
Straw polling, if we agree with this?
So
well,
the-
there's
the
two
first-
choices here.
The first question is, I think there's two things on the table. One, are you interested in allowing exterior appliances in the side yard? Question number one. And then if you are, do the setbacks that are proposed in the ordinance with the addition of the manufacturer's specifications make sense?
I think there's a third thing that includes the grandfathering instead of the 50%.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
we
we're
all
all in
agree on
agreement
that,
on
though.
grandfather.
We're all in
I even
agreement on the
agree with it.
grandfather?
I
I
even
think
agree
we all
with it.
agreed, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Months
so
ago on that.
those first two items then, does that make sense as the general questions?
For the grandfathering, it was brought up if a new build comes up, though.
That's not
Is that-
grandfather, that's not
Oh.
That's
grandfather,
not
that's all
considered
new
the same
construction.
location.
No,
It would
that's-
be
okay.
replacement of an
Okay.
existing unit or
3 walls
something like that.
demoed, but not one. I mean, that's a remodel,
Yeah, new construction.
not remodels even, okay.
Okay. So, how do we want to go around and do this then? Tim?
So I'll go first. I still say no to the side yard.
Okay.
Grandfathering is fine, and I still think we need to have setbacks too.
Okay. Matt?
I say yes to the sidewall, and I say no to the setbacks. As far as I'm concerned, the setbacks are for the manufacturers. And I still feel that people should be allowed to have them in the sidewall. And as far as the grandfathering is just fine.
Okay. Ian?
I say no to the side yard with setbacks.
So when you guys are saying with setbacks, that's throwing me off a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to allow.
Well, I
appliances-
want setbacks, okay, it's in, like, for a generator, you're gonna put it in your side yard, but,
No,
or
you
you
said
put it in
no
your
to the
rear
side
yard.
yard.
Right, no to the side yard, but because I said, you could put, like, there are houses that have 10 feet behind their garage. If they wanna hide this thing,
Yep.
now they can put it 2 feet from the property
You
line?
still have to have setbacks.
You still have to have
regardless of where it is.
setbacks.
Okay. Okay.
I say yes
Are
to.
you thinking of like a larger setback than what's here,
No,
or just?
I'm fine
no,
with
no.
the setbacks
5
that are
feet.
there.
I say yes to the side yard, yes to the grandfathering, and no to the setbacks, besides manufacturing specs.
Yep.
So I don't know if that's a no or a yes anymore. but
So it sounds like.
I want
this-
manufacturing specs to the side, but
I think we have four
Just
different
take
answers
notes.
so far.
You got that,
Take good
Tim?
notes.
not additional
I
setback
lost it. I've already
requirements.
just stopped there. That's not
Make
counting.
sure he's taking good
Okay.
notes.
All right, Lisa, do you want to, I guess I'll just go. So I'm going to say that they should be allowed in the side yard. I'm going to agree with Matt. There should be no setbacks except for the manufacturer's specifications. Lisa?
I think I'm gonna say no to side yard, and yes to setbacks.
I'm also going to say no to side yard. I'm comfortable with manufacturer specifications, and I'm definitely in favor of grandfathering.
Marty?
I would prefer no to side yards, and I'm a little confused on the setbacks, but I will agree with no to side yards, yes to setbacks.
Does that put us? No, that gives you clear direction, right, Tim?
That gives them about 50-50.
Does it? I think
Or is it
it's
3 to 5?
I think it's
We have 5
3
to
to 5.
3
So that should,
against
Five
side yards.
Against side yard, okay.
so that gives you some clear direction, you know
Yes.
how to proceed, and you're good on the grandfathering.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We need to talk about the decibel.
Yeah, I was
level.
just gonna ask, we're also
Yeah.
taking that part out,
I think that
correct?
should be gone.
Are we all in agreement?
What?
Decibel level is gone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't achieve it.
Okay.
We're,
Or measure it, I don't know how.
Yeah.
Talking about it.
it's not something we can quantify,
I actually think you could address that in a general nuisance ordinance.
I agree.
along with barking dogs.
Yeah, along with all kinds of.
Yep,
Yeah.
so we will add that.
Anybody recall what
Unmaintained
Michelle's,
appliances.
my neighbor here asked, does anybody recall what her feelings were on this?
I think she didn't want them in the backyard, because if she was having her dinner party. But I'm not sure. It was something
don't
about a
remember.
dinner party, but I don't know
Yeah,
where,
she did
I don't
say
remember
something.
where her patio is.
She wanted exception for her house, I think.
I think our personal experiences are reflected in our vote to a certain degree.
No, I agree, yeah.
I will say for me, like, I sleep with the TV on, so I don't hear my air conditioner or anyone else's. I have a big, long backyard, so it's not a big issue, but then I think of, like, having a baby and that air conditioner right outside the baby's window kicking on and waking the baby up, and mine's only 5 years old. I can still remember that really well.
Okay, so that should give you some clear direction.
Yes.
Sure.
All right, next up, we have liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report of note?
I do,
Yes.
for chamber. So tomorrow night, the Chamber is holding a State of Your Business event from 5:30 to 7, the High School Collaborative Center. If you are interested in attending, please register at berkleychamber.com.
The 22nd.
Yeah, that's the 27th.
Yep, so we all got a flyer, right?
March 27th, yep, I gave everybody a flyer. There's some flyers here too, if anybody wants to pick one up.
Okay.
All right?
Anyone else with anything to
Um,
report?
Well, unfortunately, I've been really bad at making the DDA meetings. They're almost impossible for me to make it to because of work sometimes. But I was able to attend the artwork meeting that we had regarding the artwork they want to put on 12 Mile. And they're making progress, but it's a long ways out because they have to go through funding and the final design and all the other ideas. But they have a somewhat interesting idea what they want to put there. Since the trees don't live, we're going to kind of create a tree out of metal. So the artist from, I forgot what the name of the art shop over there on 12 Mile is, but they've got some really different ideas. So,
Cool.
but I attended that Friday a few weeks ago, and they're trying to put that together.
Great.
I know that they talked a lot about the road diet portion of it in the last DDA meeting. Other than that, it's about all I saw of the actual meeting notes and the video. It was very hard to hear this month.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything else to report? No? Okay. Any other comments for the group?
I have one.
Yes.
When I was looking at the training opportunities for our RC, I noticed that they have an online version because their times are kind of inconvenient. So I signed up for that, and it actually flows pretty nicely. So if online is for you, that's kind of a nice way to do it. And it's broken up in segments. The first one's a short introduction, and after that, it's about 45 minutes to an hour that I spend on the segments.
Okay, good to know. Nothing else? No? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
9:02.